Welcome back to another episode of What Next? I'm a software engineer.
G'day, James. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for joining. Before we get into it, I do have to ask about this week's t-shirt.
All right.
Um,
Yes, indeed. This
is there a
week's
story
t-shirt,
behind this one?
there is. This is a Dragon Ball Z Goku t-shirt, which I bought having absolutely no idea who that was or what that even meant. But I like the color. So this is actually a little bit after my childhood video gaming and cartoon career, but nonetheless, the color's quite cool. And I've had a few people stop me in the street and go, "Cool shirt, man," and I didn't even know what they were talking about. So
Is that
there
how
you
they
go.
said it?
Yeah,
Cool
yeah,
shirt, man.
exactly. That's how all the kids talk these days.
You sound like my dad. Uh,
I'm probably old enough to be your dad.
no. So this week we covered not that long ago, a few weeks ago, in an episode of ours. AI is AI helping or making engineers' jobs harder, or just the career or the position of a software engineer? And it definitely got a lot of traction. That particular point in the episode, I released some reels, like some separate reels, and that one was like really popular. So I thought we'd go into a bit deeper on that one today. And I guess for engineers, maybe they're early on in their career worried about like AI, or those engineers that have been in their career for a long time worried about how AI is going to affect them. Is it making the engineer's job better in the future, or is it going to mean that there's going to be no jobs for a software engineer in the future?
Mhm. So the word "better" there is really the word "better" is doing a lot of work in that sentence as they go, right? Because
Yeah,
to be better, we need some sort of counterfactual to compare it against. So, which we don't have, and we won't have a counterfactual. So what we can say is it'll be different rather than
yeah,
better.
of
I,
course.
I,
Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think. And so
poor
the
choice of
question
words.
then is, no. I wasn't being critical at all. I'm telling myself this as much as anyone
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
Yeah. So I would argue that the change part of it is inevitable, and the question of the value that we may ascribe to that change is a really interesting question. I mean, maybe that's for today, maybe that's for another topic on its own.
mm,
It's uh, but let's just sort of lay out the extremes. There is a potential world where maybe software engineering as we know it no longer exists, or it just becomes such a very sharp end of something which is completely different, right? Like there'll always be there's always going to be layers of software of which software engineers will need to play, but the degree to which humans are writing raw software may disappear, right, in the
yeah.
way we know it today. Another version, and so don't that's not what I'm saying is inevitable, right? I'm just saying the change is inevitable, but another version of the change might actually be that we really sort of hit a plateau with this stuff, and we end up with sort of a linear extension of where we are now, which is these great tools which increase productivity but don't replace the engineer. Okay, and so
Yeah.
I think in your intro there, this idea of the way I've been thinking about this is this idea of a mech suit, like the Ripley in the mech suit from Alien. So I wrote a post about it a few weeks back, and the idea that it doesn't really replace a human; it's a like an augmentation of the human, and the reason that metaphor works is because if I'm trained in how to use a mech suit, then I can triple or quintuple or 10x my productivity because I've got
Mm.
this mech suit around me. But if I'm an idiot or a muppet and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just as, in fact, much more likely to hurt other people and myself because I don't know how to use the machine. Right, and
Mm.
I think we're in that stage at the moment. These tools are incredibly powerful if you know what you're doing and you know how to do them the right way and you have the right sort of degree of suspicion and skepticism around what they're outputting, and you know
Yeah.
how to direct them and put them on rails. Like all of that stuff, if you have the skills and the ability to do that, they're great. They're fantastic. Um, if you don't, then you're in for a world of hurt, or the people around you are in for a world of hurt, or both. So I think this I think we've got a lot of work to do. To work out how to integrate these tools into software engineering in a way that's scalable for the long term.
The role of the engineer may change quite a lot. What do you think an engineer now should be doing? And I'll give you an example. I spoke to an engineer the other day, and he said to me, I don't use the AI, like the AI IDE, like the Copilot. And I was like, oh, like, because I was considering him for an AI product company. And I messaged the a couple of engineers there, and I said, is this a problem if he doesn't want to use it? And their response was something along the lines of, not really, depends on the reasoning.
Mm.
So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So
Actually,
there's
that is interesting. I would love to know what their view was. Actually, I was expecting them to definitively to say yes, it's a problem, but so you surprised me there. What did they say?
I'll tell you what they said. One second.
It's a more
So,
nuanced answer than I was expecting.
uh, so I said to them, candidates stated that they do not use AI to assist with coding because it generates a lot of errors for them. They mentioned that while the acceleration was great, the trade-off in terms of having to debug everything and find subtle bugs was not worth the time, as they spent more time debugging than actually coding.
Mm.
And the answer from this engineer was no, assuming they don't avoid using AI altogether, but rather in specific context, I would not say that it's good or bad.
Interesting. So I think like a lot of things, these really hardcore normative views on things often end up being wrong, right? And whether that's no, I never use it, or yes, I have to use it all the time, right? I think the extremes of these things end up
Mm,
being wrong. My own personal experience with it over the last, what is it now, June, so say 4 months, 5 months of using it, like really, really hardcore use of it, this stuff, is that in the first instance, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I was generating absolute rubbish, and
yeah.
it really caught. I was totally seduced by it. Like it was like a superpower, this magic code coming out of my fingers, and tests, and it was crazy. And I was forced at some point to take stock because something wasn't working, and I had to look at something. I was hardcore into it and almost sort of addicted to it. And then at some point something wasn't working properly, and I stopped and looked into it, and I was like, oh my god, this is so bad. It's worse than garbage. Things like hard coding numbers into the actual app code, and like if test equals true, return six nonsense inside the app code to make a test pass. And you're looking at it and you're going, how on earth did I let this go through? And in the end, I wrote a bunch of code, quite a lot of code, and I threw away probably 60% of it or more
Yeah.
in the process over a kind of 3 or 4 month period. So I've got a code base now on an app that's about 45,000 lines of code, but I've probably written 100,000 lines of code. And I say
Mm.
I have written, me and Claude and me have written 100,000 lines of code. It took me a month and a half to realize that I actually needed to throw away almost everything that I'd done because it was absolute trash.
Yeah.
And then come back. But so I don't know if you're young and inexperienced and wouldn't see that. How do you know to do that?
Well, but you'd also have to assume that that will get better. So what,
Yeah.
somewhat better. So
But what do you mean? So what will get better?
like if you prompt and say like create
Oh, you
this
mean, yeah, okay. You mean the code that's
application,
generated gets
the
better. You
code
mean the
that's
code?
generated should
Yeah,
be more reliable in time, you would think. So
yeah.
my feeling, and it's with a lot of the companies I work with, it's they are earlier stage, but they are looking for the classic software engineering minds, like problem solving mindset, not necessarily how good a coder they are. So like, is there something you should focus on to, what are you going to look for knowing that they can use these tools?
Mm, mm. That's a very good question. So I think just to preface before I answer that, I think you have to assume that these tools are a given. They're going to be part of the tool chain. Okay, and I
Yep.
think you also have to realize that there are ways to use them which are safe and ways to use them which are not safe. Right. So that's the first thing.
When you
And
say
so
safe, like creating a product that's got bugs, is that unsafe, or are you talking about like from a security? Yeah.
yeah, I mean both, right?
Yeah.
So if you write, I just use safe in the broadest possible sense of the word. So safe
Yeah.
in terms of like writing crap code, but also if you're writing crap code, that's almost definitionally going to have problems. Either leaking
Yeah.
data or security
Okay.
reasons,
Gotcha.
privacy, whatever.
Mm.
Right? So those are consequences of the code being crap in the first place. But assuming that these tools are in place, the question is how do I use them? And so what I would be looking for, like actually let me go back a step. Um, I've been on about for a while about this idea of the shift from imperative to declarative computing. Okay, and just to redefine what I mean by that, imperative computing is the idea that the computer's a tool. I have to know why I'm going to do something. I then need to know what I am going to do, and then I have to know how to do it, right? And so the imperative bit is the last bit. I have to know which buttons to push, which code to type, like what tool to use, and so on. I've got to know all of the steps about how to do something. But generative AI and sort of this current generation of AI in general unlocks this thing which I refer to as declarative computing. All right, and what that means is the interface between the machine and the human has changed fundamentally. So now I still need to know why, and I still need to know what. But what I end up doing there is now I express my preference to the machine, and the machine works out how to do it. So the imperative layer, that actually, the kind of button pushing and so on, is actually done by the machine. Now we're not quite there yet. We're on our way to this, but this shift from imperative to declarative computing is profound, and it's a profound change in the way humans interact with machines. And that's going to affect everyone, not just software engineers. That's going to affect how everyone interacts with machines. All sort of knowledge workers that are interacting with machines now are going to end up in a world where what the real skill is knowing why, first of all, and then working out what to do. And that what is like, what are the right questions to ask? So from a software engineer's point of view, what you end up then doing is you have this collaborator, this intelligent collaborator that you're working with, and you're working out, you're agreeing with it about what to do, and then it goes and does it. So if you're a Muppet and you don't know what to do, it'll agree with you and go and work out how to do something completely insane, right? But if you know what you're doing and you can have that collaborative conversation and work out what to do, the areas that I've found it's most effective in is in rubber ducking a spec.
What does that mean, rubber ducking?
Right. So in software, there's this old adage that what you really need, if you've got a problem and you turn around to someone next to you and you start describing the problem to them, all of a sudden the answer comes to you before they've even said anything.
Right.
And so the argument is that if you just have a rubber duck that you can talk to, right, and explain the problem to the rubber duck, then and so this idea of rubber ducking is essentially, you just voicing the problem. And so I've found that Claude in particular is fantastic at rubber ducking. Like, I want to do this thing. I've got this code base, here it is, and I want to do this thing. So let's I spend 25 minutes, half an hour, whatever, rubber ducking with it, and it comes out with this really good spec. Now, the implementation of that spec's interesting. You have to keep an eye on it, right? You've really got to be very, very diligent with watching what it's doing. But because you've got the spec and the spec kind of makes sense, there's a particular thing about my sort of mental model here. I tend to use code as the design canvas. Like, I sort of tend to design it by writing the code and then iterate it. A lot of people who I've had this conversation with said, well, isn't that what software is? You sit down and you write a design first and then you go and implement it. And my put a pushback on it was, no, actually, sometimes you don't really know what the answer is until you've put it into code, and you need to sort of see it as code to do that. And that's the case with me. And so Claude's really good with that, because I can just sit there and let it talk to it, and then it throws back pseudocode or code examples like, no, right, and get something pretty solid. So I think, to your original question, what I'm going to be looking for then is I'm going to be looking for someone who can use these tools at that what stage effectively, right? So they can think about problems in terms of why, what, how, and then at that what stage they can collaborate like a rubber duck with this software in order to get the code in the right spot. So that is a new thing, right? I wouldn't have ever had to do that before if I was hiring someone, because you'd be ranging across why, what, and how, and thinking about them doing things imperatively. But now you sort of, as someone hiring someone, you go, okay, these tools are enormously productive if used properly, and I want to use them. I want my team to use them and get the best out of them. So I'm going to have to find people who can come into that team and have this idea, can operate in this way. And to your example in the first instance, I wonder a little bit about how someone just saying, no, I'm not going to use this. I just wonder how they're going to be able to continue in the long term, because these are the new tools.
On that point, the red flag for me was actually the way this candidate said it to me, which was kind of like shut it down. So, and that tone didn't come across when I asked the client that question. So for them, it was just a message over Slack. So it's a bit hard to gauge, but yeah, you get the point. But when you were talking about all that, then what really made me sort of think about things is, like, you're going to need people who are really aligned with the mission or the vision of the company. Because
Mm.
I guess if you can take all that context in when you're building something, like, we're working towards this, or this is what our customers want, or our ideal customers want, or whatever, then when you're, rubber ducking this idea, you have all that context. I feel like the communication side and the being on board with what you're building is going to be really important.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. Regardless of the AI side of things, I think if you don't have those shared ideas, you're in a bit of trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can give someone autonomy to go and build something, but if they're just on a different page, or they,
Yeah.
have a different belief or whatever, yeah.
I've been really surprised actually by there's a Hacker News thread the other day, and I put this comment. I think it's one of like the comment that I've posted on Hacker News that's got the most feedback points. It's like 300 point. No, 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 no. No, no, this is a comment, not an actual post, but this is actually just a comment. Yeah, yeah, it got 300 odd points on it, which is I've never had anything like that before. I think like 5 or 6 might have been the best before that. But the point I made was I've been really surprised by the negativity from some quarters of the engineering, like some engineers. And to some extent, I get a bit of it. Like there's so much hype and overhype on this tech. There really is. And people are just sort of like they're burnt from the Web3 crypto nonsense. And a lot of people are saying this is just the latest scam from the tech bros. Like that's a common theme. But it's very different. It's very different. I think there is a lot of shilling and there's a lot of scammy stuff going, a lot of nonsense. But at the core of this, the productivity increases that are available, if we use properly, they're definitely real. Like they're definitely real. But I'm really surprised at how negative some of the comments are. So some software engineers are just basically saying, oh, this is crap, it'll never do anything, it'll never be as good as a programmer. And you look at it and you just look at what it can do and you think, actually, I'm a much better programmer than I was when I didn't have this, much more productive. Now, can I make mistakes? Yes. And have I? Yes. But am I net better? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of, crazy people screaming at, with manual plows or whatever, screaming at harvesters, or
Yeah.
throwing metal bars into looms. It's that sort of behavior.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think you've got to be open to how it can change, and just be trying to use it, I guess. Use as many tools as you can. Some will work well, some won't. But I guess being conscious about what you're using as well and making sure that you don't fully rely on it. I will say I actually did some coding the other day for the first time.
Woo.
I built like a task list.
In what? What'd you use? What'd you use?
I use Visual Studio for the IDE.
Oh, you're
use
real programming.
I use JavaScript for the language.
Not a real language.
I know. I knew you wouldn't like that, but I fully use.
Please don't email any letters to me. Send them all to James.
What what I want to say though is, I just use ChatGPT to produce all of the code,
Oh,
and and it worked. Like I only loaded it on the machine, so I just opened it up in the browser. I haven't uploaded it to GitHub, but wait, that'll be the next step. And it worked. And I was like, well, this took me 5 minutes. So I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely applaud the effort, right? I really do. And I think the more people that can get into programming, the better. Like I just think it's enormously powerful, right? If the world is programmable in some way and people can program it, whatever that might mean, I think that's great. What I would say though, there's this old adage about make it work, make it right, make it fast. And so when you said it worked, I had a smile on my face, right? Because what looks like it works with a lot of this code, actually might not be right. It'll work for some value of work, but it won't be right in the sense that there may be hard. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, and I'm not saying it is in this case. And I just think
well, it worked. It did work.
You just have to be aware of the risks. You have to be aware of the risks. Yeah.
I guess
so don't start taking credit cards.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no, I don't have that. I'm not planning on becoming a software engineer. Certainly not by title. But I was curious. I was like, how can I do something?
Fantastic.
And going and building something prior to that the amount of learning you would have to do, as opposed to going, right, well, here's the code, and then I can look through it and go, oh, it kind of makes sense why that's
Yeah.
there, and so
And you
then
can
it's
even get it to explain it to you. Like you can actually pick a piece of code and
yeah,
say, "Can you explain this to me?" Right? Which is that's completely game changing.
yeah. So yeah, it's not an indication of AI taking over a software engineer's job by a tech recruiter, not yet anyway. But I think that it's definitely not. It's not a scam. Like there's no way this stuff works.
There are scams, but it's not like fundamentally a scam. Like the concept of machine generating code, like language LLM generating code, is not a scam. Like that does happen and it does work. There are tons of people out there who are scammy in this
I see what you mean.
domain.
Yeah, but there
Yeah,
always
yeah.
has been, hasn't there? Like
It is.
yeah,
This is just
yeah,
the latest. This is just the latest
yeah.
scheme. No,
Some of those like
completely.
deep what do you call them? Like the deep fakes, like of scams and things like that. That's pretty scary. Some of the stuff you hear about there.
But you know what the irony there is, that's the tech working. The fact that you can't tell the difference is the tech
That's
working,
true.
right? It's not
That's
it's not
true.
not
It's in the
working.
wrong
Yeah,
hands. It's just like
yeah, yeah,
weapons, isn't it? Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
just don't want
100%.
the wrong people to have
It's
the
like the
bad
mech suit.
weapons.
It's like the mech suit, right? You don't want to.
That's
You don't want
right.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the weapon thing applies, right? If I'm imagine a boxing match and then someone turns up in a mech suit, right? It's that's pretty. That's going to be a one-way fight.
Yep. So classic, we get to the end of an episode and we actually haven't really come to a conclusion or I hope so, I hope people have learned something. But my thoughts
Can I
are,
answer the
yeah,
question?
you go
Yeah.
answer it. Yeah.
Is AI helping or making it harder for engineers?
Yeah.
Yes. I
That is
don't
not
know.
helping, is it?
No, it's doing both, right?
It's
Is
doing
my
both.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of the joke there, right? It's doing both. Is it helping? Yeah. And is it making it harder? Yeah. Yeah. So there is a new tool set, new tool chain, new ways of working that people have to get on top of.
Mm.
There are going to be, in some cases, fewer engineers needed to solve problems that previously required more engineers. Right?
Yeah.
That is inevitable. That is inevitable. But on the plus side, the bar, I call this the level of commodity. Okay, so like this is like a level of commodity where stuff is effectively free or next to free. The level of commodity is continually rising, right? So your cost of entry to solving problems with digital technologies over time is just becoming increasingly cheaper,
Mm.
cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? And so this is another example of that. What used to, the internet came along and VC used to go and have to get $5 million of VC funding to go and buy a bunch of hardware that you could put in a data
Yeah.
center. Okay, and then cloud happened, and like no longer do you need to spend money on tin. You just consume it as you use it. Right? And this is a bit like that in the sense that you had to get a team of 10 engineers to solve a problem. Now a team maybe of 2 or 3 and a couple of designers, or one designer or so, can probably get you that first step.
Yep.
So that level of commodity is risen again. Now the question about, okay, so there may have been 10 before and now there's 2. Okay, what do the other 8 do? Well, the thing is, the other 8 can go and do their own thing. Okay,
Mm.
because the level of commodity has risen to the point where the cost of failure is essentially zero.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So embrace the change as well, like for
I think
engineers.
so.
Just embrace it is probably
I
the
think you
best
have
thing.
to.
We don't know what's going to happen, but you have to embrace it. You can't ignore it.
Well, I think we know what's going to happen to it. Like we know some of we know the direction of travel, right? We know these things are getting better, and interestingly, they're getting better. Not they're sort of the models themselves have tapped out a little bit. It looks like
Mm.
they've sort of hit a bit of a peak. The S curve might be rounding off, and I don't know if that continues, but at the moment it looks like that's true. But what's going just gangbusters is the tooling and the rigging that fits around these things to make it work. So trying to write code with ChatGPT, even I don't know what 18 months ago, was impossible. The quality was terrible, and the UX and the tooling was terrible. But then you roll forward to Tidewave or Windsurf or Cursor or Claude Code or whatever these days, and it's just worlds apart. Like it's just not even comparable.
Yeah.
And the models have gone on their trajectory, but the tooling and the tech around it is the thing that's really gone on in leaps and bounds.
Mm.
And that's going to continue. We know that's true. And I think we can also say that this why, what, how thing, this shift from imperative to declarative, I'm pretty sure that's going to continue apace.
Thank you, Matt. That's been so so interesting. I think we could talk about this topic again, or we could go into something slightly different. But I think
I'm sure
obviously a
it'll
lot
come
of people
back.
are yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, it's definitely not going away. I think a lot of people are talking about it or thinking about it nervously. Some, but hopefully that's not going to be the case. I think, like anything, change is going to bring an opportunity as well. So,
Yeah.
um, thank you for joining us. We will look to have another episode out next week, so stay tuned. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hopefully, we're getting those numbers up a little bit. Appreciate everyone who has been listening so far, and please feel free to reach out if you've got any topic ideas or anything you really want to hear about to Matt or I, or you can find the episode the what next email there as well in the comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Ciao. See you soon.